So before we jump into the 3D software, let's take a look at the fundamental building blocks of what makes a 3D model. How does the computer actually render it on the screen? How do we view it, etc., etc. So let's start off with the smallest building block a 3D model uses, and that is a single point in space right here. And all this little guy does is save position data. So when you put him in a 2D game, he would know how far, the computer would remember where he is on the X and on the Y. It just remembers where he is in space. Like if I were to move him around, it would keep track of that. And this little guy we refer to as a vertex. He's the smallest building block, okay? I can't render him on the screen. I can't see him. If I had a single vertex in a video game, he'd be invisible. There's nothing here. You can't see it, okay? It's just for the computer to use. Now, let's say we added another vertex, okay? And let's say that we wanted to take this vertex, and this vertex, and we wanted to kind of connect them. What we would do is we would use an object called an edge. And all an edge is kind of like a tool that says, hey, I'm here, you're there. Let's keep track of how far apart we are, and that way we can keep that relationship relative, okay? Now, still, even at this level, we still don't have anything that the computer screen is actually rendering that we could see. If I had this vertex with an edge and a vertex in a video game, it'd be invisible. Still nothing there. Now let's add one more point. This is going to get us closer to what we're looking for. If I connect this final vertex to these two guys, what will happen now is it will take this information, these three vertexes, it's the minimum amount of information we need to actually draw something to the screen. So the computer will fill in this shape, and this will be referred to as a triangle. What a triangle will do is this is actually renderable space. So you'll take these 3 points of data, and it'll say, hey, we know what that is, and then it'll fill in information between itself. And now we have something we can actually view in a video game. And it would look just like this, a triangle, nothing else. Okay? Now let's say we added one more point. Let's add it down here. And we connected it up, and we filled it in, because the computer says, hey, this is another triangle. We now have another triangle over here. This entire shape is what we refer to as a polygon. Okay? The square around the outside. This is a polygon. It can also be referred to as a poly, or it can also be referred to as a quad. Okay? Just remember that. Quad, it can be referred to as a quad, poly, polygon. It's all the same thing. Okay? And it just means this square that's been created. All right? Now, all polygons are made up of two triangles. That's the most basic shape it can make, and the computer will always take the more complicated shape and make it into the simplest thing it can, which would be two triangles. Okay? Now, let's look at this in a practical application. Whenever we have a 3D model in a video game, what we have is, you can see right here, look, a polygon or a quad, which I'll highlight. Boom. Okay. Another one right next to it. Boom. Another one. Boom. And then if you look around the model, everything you see here is either a square or quad, polygon, you want to call it, or a triangle. All right? An example of a triangle. There's one even right next to it. Okay? This is key, because this is what the computer likes to see, because when it goes to try to put in a video game engine, it's going to take all these quads, okay, and it's actually going to draw a line in it that we don't see in the 3D program, but it's going to do it. It's going to say, hey, I need to break this down in the most simplest shapes, but we're not going to see it in our 3D modeling program, unless we decide that we want to put the line in there. But we don't have to. The computer will do it for us, and we don't want to waste time. And also, it's easier to look at, and it's cleaner, okay? The whole idea behind these quads is to make sure it flows right, looks right, and we keep it into quads and triangles, okay? That's the most basic aspect of what makes up a 3D model. Nothing in here is made out of a weird circular shape. No, even in here, these are all just tiny squares, okay? Quads. A long rectangle, still a quad, still a polygon, okay? These long shapes will still be cut in half, made into two triangles. Everything in this is made out of a square or a triangle. Can't stress that enough. We can make other shapes with more points in them. They're referred to as n-gons. Most of the time, they're bad business. So if I were to add a dot in this square, if I were to add one more what happens is it's now not simple math. Now what it has to do is it has to calculate for that, add these extra lines, cut it up more. And what that does is the more dots we add in, basically the more points the computer has to remember how far away they all are from each other. So as when you put this in the video game, we turn it, the computer can say this point here to this point here is so far, and when we turn it, it keeps them relative to each other. So if we were to add another vertex in here, it'd be kind of wasteful. There wouldn't be any point to having it there, okay? So that's kind of a fundamental thing of talking about the building blocks of a 3D model, just what makes up a polygon, what it tries. And remember to refer back to this video at any time you kind of forget or you hear a different terminology. There's sometimes extra words and it can get a little confusing. But just remember, we have the simple building blocks. One of these little intersections is a vertex. These lines that make up the model, these are all edges. This shape right here is a triangle, just 3 points connecting, and then 4 points connecting is what we call a quad, a poly, or a polygon. All right? Okay, let's jump into the program now.